Okay, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I think we are ready to start. I'm just gonna get started slowly to introduce the program, and then we'll give people time to settle in. We had about 25 registrants for today, so I'm hoping a few more will pop in during the workshop. But let's just get started slowly, and we'll take it from there. Happy to see that those of you that are here could make it for another DEMAC workshop. Today we are getting an introduction to volunteer management, and we are really excited to have Natalia Kalantsayenko here with us. She's from the Ukrainian Volunteer Service, and I will give a bigger introduction to her in just a moment. My name is Evan, and I'm DEMAC's Capacity Development Specialist, and I'm here today with my colleague Sean. He's DEMAC's Communications Officer, and he's also here to provide technical support in case that becomes relevant for any of us. So if you have any questions or technical challenges, you can just write to him in the chat or to DEMAC's email, which is info@demac.org. Yes. I'll just give a quick word about DEMAC for anyone who's new here. So DEMAC stands for Diaspora Emergency Action and Coordination. It's a global initiative that was founded in 2015, and it's hosted by the Danish Refugee Council. And this workshop is part of our partnership with IOM since 2023 under the project Elevating the Impact of Diaspora Operations and Coordination and Humanitarian Assistance through the Framework for Diaspora Engagement in Humanitarian Assistance. And this is our fourth phase with funding from USAID BHA. Yes. So in DEMAC, we work for a deeper understanding and recognition of diasporas and humanitarian actors, and for supporting diaspora's humanitarian engagement and coordination. And we usually say that we base that work on three main pillars or three strategic priorities. So under the first pillar, we aim to enhance knowledge and awareness of diaspora's humanitarian engagement. Here we produce relevant studies that demonstrate the impact of diaspora humanitarian action. That can be either through producing reports, research, articles, and case studies, and also through raising awareness in international humanitarian fora. Under the second pillar, which is what brings us together today, we support capacity strengthening for diaspora humanitarian organizations. Sometimes that can be by facilitating access to activities that enhance skills and capacities in the diaspora. And sometimes we organize our own learning events, and sometimes with partners like today. And we've also developed a series of learning materials like toolkits or pocket guides that you can find on our website in the resource library, together with all the DEMAC research. Under the third pillar, we focus on strengthening their preparedness, coordination, and collaboration. And that's both within the global diaspora and between the diaspora and local institutional actors. Yes. So you can say that the DEMAC mission is twofold. First, we focus on enabling a more inclusive coordination and collaboration across diaspora organizations and humanitarian institutions. And secondly, we also work at facilitating a higher level of engagement, capacity, and visibility for diaspora organizations in the humanitarian system. Okay. So before we start, I'm just gonna drop a few housekeeping remarks. So I said it in the beginning, I'll just repeat it. This session is being recorded, and it might be uploaded to DEMAC's website or our YouTube channel. And as you may have noticed, your microphones are muted. That's because of the settings of the workshop. But it's going to be an interactive workshop, and we hope you will participate. And when you wish to speak, you just have to raise your hand by clicking. So in the lower part of the window, there's a hand. So if you click on raise hand, John is going to adjust your microphone settings. And that's only necessary the first time you wish to speak. After that, you can mute and unmute as per usual. Yes, so there's also a chat function and a Q&A function. So we hope you're just gonna share your reflections and questions throughout the session. Yes. Having said all of that, let me introduce you to Natalia. Natalia is the head of partnerships at the Ukrainian Volunteer Service. She implements socially important projects to develop culture of volunteering and mutual assistance in Ukraine. With expertise in volunteer management and coordination, she teaches volunteering, volunteer management, and fundraising to activists, representatives of the public sector, and others. Natalia also manages a volunteer community on the front line and temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Natalia has been working with DEMAC to develop training materials on volunteer management that are specifically tailored for humanitarian diaspora organizations. And as you know, volunteers are an essential force in driving change across various fields. It can be from humanitarian response to resettlement efforts to climate action and beyond. And what we can see in DEMAC is that usually what started as smaller volunteer-based initiatives expand and grow, it becomes more and more important to have good and effective volunteer management. So for that reason, today on the International Volunteer Day, we are really pleased to have Natalia here with us to introduce the volunteer management cycle. So thanks for being here, all of you, and thank you to Natalia for joining us. That's it for me, so I'm just gonna pass it on to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hey everyone, I'm really glad to be here with you and present and work and talk about volunteer management today. It's a special day, International Volunteer Day, so I think it's even more specific and appreciated to work with you today and talk about the importance of volunteer management. Before we go into lecture and our workshop, I would like to get to know you a little bit more. So please, if you could raise your hand and we will unmute you and you can introduce yourself, say your name, the organization you represent, and your position there, and any experience in volunteering or volunteer management that you have. Okay, could we unmute our first participant?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abdurrahman Hirsi. I am the director of Elase Network, a community organization based in London that works with community, young people, parents, and the wider community. So I'm here to learn and get some skill sets about managing volunteers and how to sustain them and retain them. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anybody else?
Hello, good afternoon. I am Mohammed Bedel from RDV, the local NGO, Relief and Development for Vulnerable based in Ethiopia. And I'm the executive director of RDV. And I'm glad to join you today through the invitation of Abdurrahman Hirsi. And we are managing volunteers, and even our organization itself is started through volunteering. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I work for the EU Global Diaspora Facility. I'm the Diaspora Relations Lead there, and I'm here to learn more about volunteer management since I work closely with diaspora organizations. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm really happy that we're here. So we will just look more into what is Ukrainian volunteer service. So this workshop was developed by with our expertise, and we're a non-profit organization that works in Ukraine to develop culture of volunteerism and mutual assistance. And we are that reliable support and resource for volunteers in the times of the war and reconstruction of our country. And before we start, I'll just quickly remind our rules of online interaction. So thank you for your participation. I would really be glad if you participate and talk, and we will interact more. We also respect each other's opinions. So as we come from different experiences and backgrounds, it's important to respect each other and our opinions as well. So when we don't speak, we mute our microphone, and when we speak, we raise our hand and unmute. So I think this is the most important rules for today, and we can start. And before we start going into theory, I would like you to go to mentimeter.com with this QR code, or you can go to website mentimeter.com and enter the code. So, and there you will have the questions that we will discuss more, and I'll share them in a second. Okay, so here is the QR code once again, and here you can see the code. So if you click on menti.com and enter the code, you will see the question, and you can enter your response so we can see what are your associations with volunteering and talk about volunteering more. If you have any questions about this instrument, or you cannot open it, please let me know. Can you use the, okay, here is Joy. Got it, thank you. Any other associations? I want volunteers. I'm a volunteer. Community, friends, free time. Committed, dedicated, no or minimum pay. Okay. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so if we talk about volunteering, it's also about, it's a term of our dedication of our free time and talent in order to have this community and have this impact on some social problem. And 1 second. And if we talk about volunteering, and if we want to understand the term of volunteering, let's talk about different situations and decide whether it's volunteering or not. So there is a situation, a case, in which some person participated in the work of the humanitarian headquarters, sorting packages for refugees or IDPs. At the end of the shift, the coordinator gave the person an envelope with $50. Is this person a volunteer or not? What do you think? Do you think it's volunteering or is it something else? If you're not able to talk, maybe you can just write in the chat and open and unmute your microphones to say your opinion, whether it's volunteering or not. Okay. Well, so in this case, this is not volunteering, as the person that volunteers receives the money for its work. So in case if we volunteer, we don't receive any salary or any other money present. We only can receive compensation for our transportation, accommodation, and food and other stuff. So if we talk about volunteering, it's important to remember that volunteering is voluntary and non-profit socially beneficial activity that is aimed at solving or elevating a social problem. So volunteering has three main characteristics that we need to remember of. First of all, that's voluntariness. So everybody has freedom and to choose volunteering or not to choose volunteering, to choose the sphere of volunteering they think of and they like. And so nobody can, make us volunteer in any other situation. So nobody, like teacher at school, cannot make the students or any other children to volunteer at some events. It's our freedom and it's our desire to do some good deeds. Another characteristics of volunteering is that it is unpaid, so we can't receive money or salary for our volunteering. So as I said previously, we can receive some transportation costs for our food and other stuff, for accommodation if our volunteer event is in other city. But it's important to understand that we cannot receive any payment for volunteering activity. And the third characteristics of volunteering is public change or solving or elevating some social problem. So if we help our family, it's usually not volunteering, because volunteering is some activity that is actually aimed to solve some social problem that is in our country, in our community, or in the world itself. Besides, there are additional characteristics for volunteering that make it effective. First of all, legality. So our volunteering should be legal and in terms of our laws. Also, humanity. We all remember that all of us are equal and all of us are human and we need to respect other human beings. And also equality. So equality is something that is everybody can join volunteering it doesn't matter about the ethnicity, religion, or whatever. So everybody can join different spheres of volunteering, and all of us are equal here. And there are different ways to join volunteering. So first of all, it's individual volunteering. So small individual actions, they also are volunteering and they also matter. So people can volunteer on their own, just feeding homeless animals, supporting those in need that they know in their community, picking up the trash, and so on. So it is something that a person can do, like small actions that are volunteering because they help to solve some social problem. We can also join volunteering together with a team of friends. So maybe people can be a leader or just unite the friends and the community around themselves and create a team to implement small volunteer events and do some good actions. So maybe create a small event to pick up the trash in some garden nearby or in some park, or create a volunteer event to feed homeless animals or to work with homeless dogs in the shelter, and so on. And besides, volunteers can join different nonprofit organizations or initiatives. So probably you and your organizations involve volunteers and manage them. So they join the organizations or initiatives depending on their interests, skills, location, and opportunities they want to join. If we talk about volunteering, there is a term volunteer management, then that's why we're here. Volunteer management is a managed system for engaging, coordinating, motivating, and building lasting relationships with people that allows our volunteers to grow into through meaningful personal involvement in improving community life, helping others, and also improve their own skills and develop their own professional and volunteering experience. In simpler terms and in other words, it's organizing our work with volunteers, our coordination of volunteers, in which we as organization achieve greater results, have more time to create other activities and scale organization, and volunteers take on some of our functions and tasks in our organization. So this is what is volunteer management. Could you please share, do you have any experience in volunteer management and how does it work shortly in your organizations right now? You can just unmute yourself and share so we can share the
Hello, my name is Zakaria Ahmed Hassan. I'm from Talo organization. We use some management volunteer. That is when we are making contribution for food contribution or when we are making assessment or surveys, we use some strategies that we use with volunteers. For example, when we need to make an assessment and a region, when district or the regional, we contact every time for the schools or the university, the adult students. We distribute our questionnaire. We teach them how they will go and make an assessment. At that time, at the end of the assessment, we give the students some small prizes. That means they are working with us for not longer time, for shorter time. For example, they work with us 1 month or 15 months, 15 days, so that to collect the data and information. That way we use for volunteer. That system we use. In terms of distribution for food, we use some strategy for volunteer management. Example, we highlight the IDP communities. Example, the elders, and we select each come 2 or 3 person, those people who can help us in terms of distribution. And at the end of the distribution, we give them some small money or some prize that we use in our organization when we are using for volunteers strategy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Anybody else want to share your experience in volunteer management? And you can just unmute yourself, or you can write in chat if you would like to.
Yeah, thank you. This is Mohammed again from RDV Ethiopia. As my colleague also was mentioning recently, we are using the same approach. We normally have volunteers who are working most of the time with us, especially during the activities implementation at ground level. We use also during the social mobilizations. We use also the distribution activities that we have. And even inside the organization, we have also volunteers who are helping us in a different ways, technically and sometimes financially. For example, we have expertise who are volunteering us if we want to write a proposal, if we want to do an assessment, and many areas that we work. So we are having volunteers that are different level. Some are expertise, some are youth at ground level, some are community leaders at TWS or at village level in the context of Ethiopia. And that's how we engage and manage with the volunteers who are working with our organization. When it comes to the reward, sometimes we give recognition, sometimes we give small incentives in kind or in cash, but that's insignificant. The most important thing is that we engage them and we keep in touch to work together in a common value. For example, helping our people who are needy in the ground is the main agenda that RDV has, as well as our volunteers are convinced. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Any other opinions, or anybody else wants to share your volunteer management experience and maybe techniques? Maybe you have some challenges in volunteer management, so it will be really interesting to hear about that and to talk about that as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Okay, so I am Ahmed Abdi from UH organization in Mogadishu. I am kind of off the topic, but I understand the concept of volunteer management in organizations. The UH organization has currently 24 volunteers across our geographic coverage. Volunteering in any organization is a great step forward to learning and improving and growing your career. So we give youth the opportunity to develop their skills and knowledge. So it's a great way to step into the work industry. It's also a great opportunity for organizations to utilize the knowledge and the fresh skills of young graduates. So it's a great step. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. Sorry for the background noise. It's in a messy, loudy place. Sorry.
That's okay. Anybody else wants to share the experience or challenges with volunteers? Awesome. Thank you for your participation and your opinions. So yeah, as you guys said, volunteer management is the management and work with our volunteers in order to coordinate them, to motivate them, to engage them, and that it would be effectively for our organization and for the volunteers themselves. It is important to remember that quality volunteer management, it is something that is there to help our organizations and us as the leaders or volunteer coordinators of our organization to achieve more results. So quality volunteer management will reduce the burden of the organization's employees. So this is something that will help volunteers, will help our employees to engage volunteers to delegate some tasks, and so volunteers create and do any other functions of our organizations, and our employees have opportunity and time to scale our organization. Also, quality and effective volunteer management meets the expectations and needs of the volunteer. So it's important to understand that it is something that meets the needs of our volunteers, but also the needs of our employees and project managers and our organization. Besides quality volunteer management, it increases the efficiency of the organization, the amount of the assistance provided. So as I said beforehand, this is something that helps us to reach more and achieve more results. And it also creates a friendly volunteer community. So volunteer management is not only about individual management of volunteers, but also about creating a community, a friendly community that will be a volunteer support and other support for our organization. Besides, as some of you said, volunteer management and effective volunteer management, it helps to train future specialists. So it is something that helps volunteers to grow, to improve their skills, to improve their experience, and become future specialists in the field, in the organization, or maybe in any other organizations, but still in non-profit sector. And it also allows the volunteer to improve their competences, and create a really ambassador community for your organization. As we talked, all volunteer management should answer this little triangle of needs. So when we create our volunteer programs, we always need to analyze before what are the needs of three main actors in our system. So what are the needs of volunteers that we involve? So what do they need? What do they expect? What do they think of? Do they need the community, or do they need, I don't know, any motivation, or do they need any recommendations from us, and so on. So this is something when we put ourselves in the place of volunteer and analyze what our volunteers might need from this volunteer program. Besides, we as organization understand and analyze our needs in volunteers. So what do we need? What is our main expectation from volunteers? What can close this need? And so on. So if we need somebody to specialize in finances, for example, in order to help us with on volunteer basis, we have a need to find for a volunteer with different finance skills, for example, and our need is that. And besides, we always think about the need of community and our beneficiaries. So what is their main need? Is their main need to receive psycho-emotional support? Is their main need, I don't know, to have the clean environment, and so on. So we remember and analyze the needs of this community and beneficiaries, and remember the social problem that we solve with this volunteer program. In order to build effective and quality volunteer management, we use an instrument that is called Cycle of Volunteer Management. So this is a tool that allows you as a volunteer coordinator or project manager or leader of your volunteer community to plan and implement work with volunteers in high quality manner. So this is an instrument that you can use in order to build really professional and quality volunteer program and interact with your volunteers in long term. The cycle, it shows us the way of volunteer in our initiative or organization. So like this path of volunteer in our initiative, and it consists of 8 stages that we need to consider, we need to remember, and we need to think of when we build processes of working with volunteers. So when we think and plan our volunteer program, it's important to use the cycle of volunteer management, and it can help you to remember all the necessary stages in order to build this volunteer program. And the cycle actually looks like this. So it has 8 stages, and it is very important to have this order of the stages. So the first one is program planning. So we start our interaction with volunteers and our volunteer program as all other program and activities, for example, in project management, with planning. So we plan our program, we plan what do we need to do, what volunteers we need, and so on. The next stage is recruitment of volunteers. So this is the stage when we involve our volunteers and we look for them. The next stage is selection of volunteers. The fourth one is onboarding of volunteers. So it's like their adaptation in our organization. The fifth stage is motivation of volunteers, then support and assistance, then evaluation and recognition, and the last stage is community involvement. So the three main cases of this cycle of volunteer management is that, first of all, we need to remember that we cannot skip any stages. So, for example, we can't skip the selection stage if we want to really have volunteers that will have enough skills or specific skills or specific things and opinions about the sphere that we help in. Or we can also not skip, for example, motivation or any other stages. So in order to create really professional and effective volunteer program, we do need to remember and analyze and plan all of the stages of the volunteer management, of the cycle of the volunteer management. The other thing is that we need to remember that we cannot create our volunteer program in vacuum, like without thinking about scale organization. So when we create volunteer program for specific project, we need to always remember that there is other activities in our organization, and we need always remember that all of them are connected and interconnected. So we always think about all these things in order how we can unite different volunteers from different projects within our organization. And it's always necessary to remember that we don't need to set sky-high goals for our first volunteer programs. We can start from something small. We can start from some small goals and small things that we want to achieve, and then go into further results and further goals and further aims that we want to achieve with our volunteers. But it's necessary to remember that we can start from small volunteer program and then analyze our mistakes, analyze our successes, and then scale it to the next level. So let's look through different stages of our volunteer cycle of volunteer management and see what do we need to analyze and think of on each stage of our cycle of volunteer management. So first of all, we start from planning the volunteer program. When we plan, we always think about, we think beforehand about all the stages of working with volunteers. So in this case, you look on the cycle of volunteer management, get and gather your team and people who will be involved in working with volunteers, and think and plan all stages of our cycle of volunteer management. So what do we do? How many people do we need for this volunteer project? Do we need only one person? Do we need 10 people? Do we need 100 people to make this project effective? And how many volunteers do we need? And so on. We also think of our triangle of needs. So what is our need as an organization? What can be volunteer needs? And what are the needs of the community? On this stage, we also understand what specific functions will the volunteers perform. So if we look for volunteers in our communications department, we understand that we can have, for example, communication manager volunteer who will write different social media posts, create designs, or maybe work with different mass media in order to help us to strengthen our communication materials. Or maybe we're looking for somebody who will help in our humanitarian headquarters, and then we will have functions like to sort humanitarian aid, or to maybe load the trucks with humanitarian aid, and so on. So this is something that we need to think of on during the planning Yes, so we'll think of what functions, what tasks these volunteers will have. So we cannot involve volunteers if we don't understand what their tasks will be. On the stage of planning, it is also important for you and your team to understand and choose a specific person who will coordinate the volunteers. So is it the project manager of the project who coordinates the volunteers? Is it community leader? Or maybe it is community manager in your organization. So we need to understand who is our coordinator, who will communicate with our volunteers, who will be in charge of our volunteer community, and who will track all the results and all the tasks in our volunteer program. And the last stage of this planning process is understanding what resources do we need. So in this case, we also remember that for creating effective and motivating volunteer program, we need to understand what financial resources do we need. Do we need finances for accommodating our volunteers? Do we need finances for ordering lunch for our volunteers if it's a lone volunteer event? Do we need any merchandise for our volunteers, like t-shirts or any other prizes, in order to keep the motivation of our volunteers that took part in some events? So we analyze what financial resources do we need. We also analyze if we need any maybe human resources, like if we need help from our communications department, if we need help from our financial or administrative department of our organizations, and so on. So in this case, or maybe some law consultations. So in this case, this is something that we also analyze in the beginning in order to plan, for example, fundraising activities for this program, or to look for any other staff and help and consultations in order to plan the volunteer program. The volunteer program can have different formats. It depends on your choice, your preferences, and your organization. So maybe it will be just, a spreadsheet in Google Docs in which you plan all the stages of the cycle of volunteer management. Maybe it can be beautiful slides of the presentation where you write everything down. So this is something that you need to decide. You need to try, and maybe you'll have the right format for you and your colleagues. So this is something that will work for you and will be comfortable and will be useful and effective for your organization and for your specific experience. After planning, when we understand what our volunteers will do, when we understand what is our need of volunteers, what tasks they perform, what is their function, then we start to recruit our volunteers. We start to look for them, and create materials in order to search for the right volunteers for our event. So first of all, it is really useful instrument to sit down and create and imagine perfect volunteer for our organization. So create a portrait of our volunteer. You can do it with your colleagues. So this is something that when you understand that you look for volunteers for specific event or for specific project, you can imagine and dream of your perfect volunteer and write everything down. How old is that volunteer? Do they study in university for specific education? What hobbies do they have? How do they look like? Maybe what is their favorite entertainment, and so on. So we create the image of our volunteer in order to first of all understand who is the perfect person for this volunteer position. After that, when we understand who is our perfect volunteer, we together, maybe with our communication department or by ourselves, we need to create our volunteer search announcement. So this is something that is our communication message to volunteers. In this case, it is really important to understand what do we want to know volunteers about us? What do we want them to understand about this volunteer position? What do they need to know before they start volunteering with us? So this is something that we need to remember, and we need to write down in our announcement, as well as different details about this volunteering position. So if there is a specific schedule for this, or if there are any specific location, and so on. Okay, I see that there is a Q&A. 1 second. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your participation today. All right, so when we created the announcement. Okay, please mute. Yes, thank you. So when we created the announcement and we created the right and correct communication message, we can go to and brainstorm what communicational channels we can use to find our perfect volunteer that we created in our portrait. So for example, if it's a young person, a student at some university, maybe the perfect communication channel will be some websites of universities where we can text and ask them to share our announcement. Or maybe there are some Facebook groups of this university, or of any different, I don't know, entertainments and hobbies, that clubs in universities where we can share our announcement. So communicational channels, they can differ depending on the people you are looking for, but there are different channels that you can use. So it can be social media like Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and any other channels that are popular with the organizations and with your volunteers or people who are you looking for. You can also use different email newsletters for your community. So maybe you have a database of your volunteers or people who have participated in your events. So it's very great to share the newsletter with them, share the volunteer opportunities, and understand what is going on. And maybe they will also be involved, and they like specific volunteering opportunity within your organization. Besides, there are different offline communicational channels. So it can be different posters or text messages or different things that you can distribute among libraries, youth centers in your communities, maybe, I know, some posters on in some cafes or restaurants that can be your partners of your organizations. So this is something that you can also use. Besides, always remember about different in-person or group meetings. So maybe you will be invited to any public discussions or public presentations where you can mention your volunteering opportunities. Or maybe you have different meetings in universities where you can also share and involve young people for your volunteer opportunities. Also, remember that you can always ask your partners to share, your partner organizations to share the information. So maybe they can share it among their communities, among their colleagues, among their partners as well, or in their social media. So you can also use that in order to find and look for the volunteers. So that's when we start recruiting our volunteers. Also, it's important to remember in this case that when we recruit volunteers, people can come from different experiences, and maybe they will not be the perfect match for us as an organization. Maybe they will have different things that they appreciate. Maybe they have different values or different overviews of this world. So in this case, we always need to remember that we need to select the volunteers. There is no such thing as a perfect volunteer or superhero, and it's always we always think that it's better to have more people. So we think about quantity other than quality, but it's important to think and process our applications and select the volunteers that are actually have our values, that actually have understanding of volunteering, and that actually want to work and volunteer with our organization. In the stage and during the stage of selection our volunteers, the volunteers we need to think about what our main criteria of selection. So what criteria are important to us? Is this age, or is it any professional experience, if it's some specific volunteering in some specific sphere? Is it schedule and availability of this person? So or maybe it's some motivation or knowledge of specific language or specific expertise. So we think about criteria that is important and it is the most important to us, and we think of how we can apply it to our applications. We also think about different selection methods, and we choose the most appropriate selection method for our volunteer event or organization. So it can be questionnaire or application form in Google Forms, when we just ask different questions about the person, their motivation, their experience, and so on. So this is like the easiest way, and you can analyze and select it. I also encourage you to always check and review social media of the volunteers that come to your organization and that apply to your organization, because this is something that can show you if this person really shares the values of your organization, really has that experience, and so on. So for example, if our organization helps children with healthy food and healthy living, we cannot select a volunteer who posts different alcohol or different unhealthy stuff on their Instagram, for example. So this is something that helps us to understand whether we can really choose this person. Another selection method that you can use is recommendations. And those recommendations can be like recommendation letters that people can send to you, or they can attach to your application forms, but it's also maybe contacts of recommendation, so contacts that you can contact and check if the person is not lying, and that people really can recommend this person as a volunteer. If this is a volunteer position for long-term or specific functions that are really important and quite close, for example, we can create interview. So this is something more, this is an opportunity for you and for a volunteer as well to get to know you better, to understand if they really want, and for you to understand if the volunteer is really your volunteer, your perfect volunteer, if you can select them, and for volunteers to also understand if they want to continue in the spheres of volunteering and with you as an organization. So this is something that you can use for volunteers in order to understand if you can really select them and if these are right people for your organization or project. Besides, again, if you are looking and selecting and recruiting volunteers for some long-term positions, for example, like communication manager or law consultant and so on, maybe you can create different tasks, right? So where you can check if they have that experience that they talked about, where you can check their skills, their knowledge, where you can check if they really understand the law for your organization and so on. So you can create different tasks if you want to have more specific selection of your volunteers. And in this stage of the cycle, we also need to think of what are the next steps. So how do we communicate with people who we selected? What do we say to them? Where we invite them? Where we communicate with them? And so on. And we also remember to communicate with people who we didn't select. And in this case, there can be people who we don't select because of their values, and then we create communication letter and email with correct and ethic communication, but unfortunately we cannot select you for some reason. We can also remember then with people who we cannot select, maybe of the amount or for some schedule reasons or so on, but they can still be the community for our next volunteer projects. It's important not to lose them, but keep their contacts, you know, and again, keep them in your community and keep them interested in your volunteer opportunities or in your activities as an organization. So in all the communicational materials with volunteers, in case you have not selected them and reject them for some volunteer opportunities, it's important to thank them, of course, for their interest and for their dedication, and as well as share that they can follow your social media for some updates and newsletters, and they can join other volunteer events, and you will be really glad and happy to invite them to other activities, but unfortunately not this volunteer opportunity in this case. So when we selected perfect volunteers for our organization, we have communicated with them and told them to come to our organization, and we have communicated and sent all the rejections to those volunteers who are unfortunately not for us, not for this project. We are going into the next stage of onboarding. So this is I think one of the most important stages, because this is the involvement of volunteers in your organization. So this is something when the volunteers adapt to your organization and to volunteering processes in your organization. During this stage, some volunteers can leave, and it's okay. So maybe they understood that this volunteering and this volunteer opportunity is quite difficult for them, and maybe they're not ready to face this function and these tasks in this volunteer work. Maybe they will have any personal circumstances, and that's okay. Or maybe you will see that you are not sharing the right and correct values together. So that's also okay. And that is the stage where you can talk, you know, and analyze the results of the onboarding. In correct and quality and effective onboarding, there are different ways where you can, how you can include the volunteers in the volunteering process. First of all, it's really important in this stage for volunteers to get to know you as organization. So it's important for you to introduce the organization, your mission, your vision, all the projects that you implement, and so on. So, and also for volunteers, it's really important to get to know each other. If you have a group of volunteers, it's important for them to meet, to have some interaction and some chat, maybe during some networking event, so they can get to know each other and understand that they have different colleagues and volunteers with whom they can work together. It's also it's important to introduce your team to the volunteers, so they understand and know who is responsible for what, who can they communicate in any cases, for example, in case of emergency, in case of communication materials, in case of project management, and so on. And it's also important to introduce volunteers with the tasks that they are responsible of. So during the volunteer briefing, it's important to show them what they're going to do, how they want to interact with beneficiaries, maybe teach them and show them where to find for any instruments that they need, where to look for different things that they might need during their volunteering, and so on. Maybe some communicational rules that you have in your organization, and so on. So this is something that this stage is about educating volunteers, so they will be effective in volunteering. They will understand what they do, how they do it, when they do it, and so on. So this is really important. And I also, if you do it, for example, during online or offline meeting with your volunteers, I encourage you also to write it down in some document, in some, briefing, where you write down all the rules that you formed together, all the details about organizational details, like whom to contact, where to come, how to sort humanitarian aid, and other stuff. So this is the document that the volunteers can come to when they forgot something, or when they want to learn something new or discover some more information. So this is the document will really help them to adapt to the processes and learn faster how to really implement their activities. During onboarding, it's also important to brief the volunteers about your rules of organization. So if you have any safety protocols, if you have any protocols of communication with the beneficiaries, for example, and or maybe if there are any rules in interacting with your team. So if you have any protocols and procedures that volunteers should know, it's important to brief them and also to write it down in the document that you can provide them with. For volunteers, as I said before, it's really important to have some kind of community. So you can create some volunteer chat or volunteer group for your organization or a specific project, and have this space for online interaction. So they can communicate, they can ask for any recommendations, they can network, maybe they will organize some non-formal meetings by themselves, and that's also okay because it strengthens their connections. So it's important for you to create the space and create an opportunity for them to really have the space of trust and understanding and communication between themselves and with your team as well. In the end of onboarding, it's important to analyze and reflect on the stage. So if the person does everything right, maybe volunteers will need some mentors, and that's also okay, and that's perfect way to help them in this onboarding process. So if you, for example, if you are involving new volunteers, maybe you have some volunteers that are longer with the organization and they are more experienced, and they can be mentors for newcomers, for those who are coming to your volunteer organization and to your volunteer project, and they can teach them, and help them with any other questions. So that's also a good way to help newcomers with onboarding. And in the end of the stage, we reflect on our results. We reflect on if people and our new volunteers have any questions, if they understand what is the organization and what they do, if they can explain and do it correctly. And also in the end of onboarding, we sign specific documents with volunteers that we need for specific project. So maybe we need some volunteer document, right? Some volunteer agreement. Maybe we need some NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Maybe we need some agreement for media sharing, photo sharing, video sharing, and so on. So depending on procedures and protocols of your organization. So in the end of onboarding, it's very important to sign these documents with volunteers and for you to save them and structure them in your database and in your clouds or document spaces, so you can have it all in one place and structured with access for volunteer coordinators. When our volunteers are onboarded, so they have had perfect adaptation period, they are they have like first experience, they understand what to do and how they do it, they come to your organization regularly. After onboarding, they might, so in long term, in volunteering regularly, they might start to lose their motivation. And that's our step when we come in with kind of small motivational things that can keep up motivation of our volunteers and help them to continue their work. In this case, in this stage, we understand our volunteers more. So we got some time and space to get to know them more. We had opportunity to talk to them. We had opportunity to watch their how they create and do their and implement their tasks and activities, and we can, you know, understand what motivation they usually have for their activities. And on this stage, we answered 2 questions. So first of all, how do we support a person's motivation during volunteering? So what ways we can use, what methods we can use to support motivation of our volunteers, and also what activities do we conduct? So how often do we conduct those activities, and like what activities we can do for our volunteers. When we talk about motivation, it's important to understand that usually motivation is hidden, so no volunteer will tell you the truth about their motivation, because usually they don't understand their inner motivation sometimes, and usually this motivation cannot be, it can be some personal stuff that we can see and we can analyze when we talk and watch this person. So we have the theory of motivation, according to which there are 3 types of motivation in volunteering. So first of all is affiliation. So this is the feeling of involvement, feeling of the community, when our volunteer community, when volunteers come into volunteering in order to have the community of friends, the community with whom they can go to non-formal meetings, with whom they can spend time, who understand them, who where they are equal, and so on. So this is something when people come for people, and this is the motivation of affiliation. In order to keep motivated our volunteers who have this type of motivation, we need to create different communicational opportunities. So this can be different parties for our volunteers, like maybe non-formal parties after our volunteer events. It can be different celebrations of holidays together. So we need to create a lot of different opportunities for our volunteers together to spend some time, to share their experiences, to talk, to send some memes to each other, and so on. So this is online communication, offline communication, and different opportunities and possibilities that we can create for our volunteers to really feel this community and to have this community around them. The second type of motivation is power. So volunteers with motivation of power come to volunteering in order to kind of be better than others. I know that it sounds quite not in volunteering terms, but unfortunately it's some human nature. So usually people come for power, to be leaders of something, to realize themselves and develop themselves through volunteering. And when people come with such type of motivation, you can usually notice that they will try to lead other people. They will try to have more power. They will try to get more tasks and so on in order to maybe lead some groups. So in this case, how can you support volunteers with a type of motivation power? First of all, for them, it's really important to have the recognition. So for public recognition and inner recognition as well. So maybe you can create a story or a post about them on your social media. Or maybe you can create a partnership with mass media and create a story about this volunteer there. Maybe we will have some some recognition event and provide different certificates for such volunteers. Also, as I said, they like to lead the groups. So maybe you can provide them with different role, like to lead the group of volunteers who are sorting the humanitarian aid. So they can have their own group of people who can they coordinate and control, and be the leader of some small volunteer groups in your volunteer project. So this is motivation power. And the last type of motivation is achievement. So these people come in volunteering with motivation to achieve some results. And so today will be better than yesterday. So they are coming to have some result that they can see, that they can understand, that they can achieve during volunteering. And usually they want a lot of results and reports from you as volunteer coordinators. So that is something that keeps and helps you to keep their motivation. It's to create different reports, to maybe create different feedback videos from beneficiaries where they can really thank the volunteers and show that this help that volunteers provided really helped the beneficiaries. So those people with this type of motivation, they really like to have the result that they can see and that they can achieve during their volunteering. There is one thing that you always need to remember is two things actually. First of all, people with different types of motivation, they usually go into conflict. So for example, people with achievement motivation and people with affiliation motivation, they can have conflicts because people with affiliation motivation will talk a lot, and communicate and spend time together instead of doing the volunteer work. And people with achievement motivation, they will just like say, stop talking, let's do work, we need to finish and have the result today, so stop doing your non-formal communication and taking pictures and videos and just talking and laughing and so on. So this is something that can cause conflicts between different volunteers. So it's your responsibility as volunteer coordinator to create the dialogue, to notice this conflict, to protect your volunteers, maybe also think beforehand so this conflict cannot happen. So this is something that can also that is also important to remember. Besides, types of motivation can change in people. So maybe in some period of life, I will have power motivation, but then I'll have any personal circumstances or any other changes, and my motivation can change, and I can have affiliation motivation. So it's important for you to understand that it can change, and then you will need to change different methods of motivating each person. It's also essential to create different ways of motivation. So if you have a volunteer group, you cannot create volunteer event only for volunteers with affiliation motivation and give certificates only to volunteers with power motivation. No, unfortunately, it doesn't work like this. So you need to create different opportunities for all of them. And people with different types of motivation, they will choose the opportunities that they like. So people with power motivation, they will not come to, maybe they will not come to non-formal meetings and holidays and parties because they don't need this affiliation, that they don't need the community, but they will need like the certificate and any recognition from volunteer, coordinator, and so on. But people with affiliation motivation will come and will participate, and they will like this. So I think that's also important for you to understand that you provide different opportunities and you provide different methods for them, and they choose and they work for different people. When we understood the motivation of our volunteers, created different regular opportunities to support the motivation of our volunteers, the next stage is support and assistance. So in this stage, we continue to interact with our volunteers and assist them in their regular volunteering activities. So first of all, in this case, we think about opportunities to train our volunteers. So usually during this stage, the volunteers really need and desire different capacity strengthening activities. So maybe we can provide them with additional trainings so they can develop their skills to really implement their activities more professionally. Maybe we can create some communication course for them so they can understand how to speak to beneficiaries more and so on. So on this stage, we really think of training the volunteers and stuff that we can help them to improve in order for them to do their work effectively. We also think about prevention of burnout. Sometimes volunteers are those people who usually think about giving more, so they usually give a lot, and it's your responsibility as volunteer coordinators to really notice when something is not going right, when people are starting to burn out, when people are starting to be exhausted, and give them some red card to stop their volunteering and to go rest. So in this case, we need to think of how do we talk with volunteers about burnout and exhaustion, how we can adapt. So in case like if volunteer communicates with us that they are tired, how do we change the schedule of volunteering? Is it okay? How do we communicate with others? And so on. So in this case, we think about how do we look for this stuff. And we also protect the volunteers. In this case, we think about how we protect volunteers from each other. Yes, so in case of any conflicts and so on, how do we protect volunteers from other people, maybe from our beneficiaries, or maybe from our team? And also in this case, we think about resolving any conflict situations. So if something happens, what do we do? How do we have any meetings to support them? Do we have any one-on-ones or regular group meetings? Do we have any psychosocial or psycho-emotional support for our volunteers if they work with any tough topics? So maybe this is something that you want to think of on the stage and create such opportunities for your volunteers to provide them with the support so they can stay long-term in your volunteering. All right, so before we go to the last stage of our cycle of volunteer management, do you guys maybe have any question that we can answer so far? Maybe about motivation or recruitment or anything else?
If you can a little bit go back to Natalia to the affiliation, how they differ than the others.
Yeah. So affiliation, people with type of affiliation they are usually more friendly, so they communicate really a lot. They will write in chat a lot. They will communicate offline during the volunteer event. They will really like, and they will always wear the merchandise that you will give them with your logos and stuff. So they will really be a part of community and show themselves as part of community. So this is, I think, the biggest specific of this type of motivation, that they are really there in volunteering to be friends, to have a group of friends, a group of a community in which they can really communicate and share common values and share different communication activities.
So this kind of volunteers, they're not looking for power, so but they are ready to elect somebody else to lead them, huh?
Yes, yes. They don't want power at all. They really want just a friendly environment, and they are ready to volunteer and to do their job, and they are doing their functions and tasks, but they don't really want to lead anybody or have like really big results. They are there mostly to spend some time with people they like.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other things? Okay, let's then move to our two last stages, actually. So, at the end of our volunteer program, at the end of our cycle of volunteer management, there is evaluation and recognition. As in each project, as in each managing project, there is also evaluation stage in which we evaluate and analyze what are our results, what do we need maybe to change, what do we need to keep, how do we need to understand whether it was successful or not. So this is something, this is the stage in which we evaluate the results of our project, the results of our volunteers, and the successes or mistakes of our volunteer program. And during this stage, we also thank our volunteers for their work. So it's really important to remember about recognition of volunteer work. So on this stage, we always think about providing feedback. So how do we provide feedback? Is it one-on-one meeting? How often we provide feedback? In which format? Is it during the meeting? Is it written? And so on. So in this case, we really think about feedback to volunteers in order to analyze and reflect on the results and on their feelings as well. Yeah, so maybe in some cases they will not achieve as much because they have some circumstances. And this is your time to evaluate together, to reflect, to talk, to provide feedback to each other and to the organization. On this stage, we also show recognition. So we thank the volunteers, we provide them with different presents, certificates, maybe we provide them with recommendation letters, maybe we provide them with different opportunities, prizes, some souvenirs, our merchandise, photo albums, and so on. So how do we thank them for what they did to us? Maybe it will be a post on social media. Maybe it will be some just merchandise that we provide them. Maybe it will be like thank you meetings. It's really important also to thank our volunteers, not only in the end of the project, but maybe at some holidays. For example, as today, during the International Volunteer Day, it's important to thank the volunteers that they do something and that they're part of your community, and it's really appreciated. And of course, on this stage, when we think about the stage, we think of how do we finish cooperation with our volunteers. So in case if the volunteers want to leave, how do we finish the cooperation with them? How do we talk with them about this this finish? How do we offboard them from the volunteer activities? How do we reflect with them on the project? How do we receive feedback from them about their volunteering activities? Because this feedback is also important for us as an organization in order to improve our further activities. So in this case, we also think about how do we finish the cooperation with our volunteers in case we finish the project. So if we finish the project, how do we say goodbye to our volunteers? Do we have any sum up meetings? Do we have any goodbye meetings, maybe goodbye parties, farewell parties for our volunteers? So we need to really think of, bless you. In this case, we really need to think of how do we finish this cooperation and how do we finish in case if the person leaves or if we finish the project. Okay, I see the hand here. Is this the question? I think, yeah, Ahmed.
Yeah. So I think I'm actually on the road trying to watch the session, and also so sorry for the distraction. So I'm actually going to ask one question. It's about I'm sure you know this, but most local organizations, particularly in Somalia, find a hard time finding volunteers because if they have to find one, they have to work under difficult context or operations. So how do we encourage volunteers to get engaged in local organizations while recognizing their need and also understanding the needs of organizations, both financially and in terms of operational context? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that it's really, when you engage volunteers, it's really important to create correct communication message for them, in which you really explain the impact that their work can contribute to. So for example, even if we look for volunteers for some cleanup, we still need to make accent, you know, for the impact that their action will create. It's really it is something that usually motivates people to join some events or some volunteering activities when they understand that their small involvement will help to solve or change something. So I think it's mostly about the impact, and it's also about the mission of your organization. So when you create the communication message, it's important to look for some actions that you can do in order to, you know, prioritize your mission, prioritize the impact, so volunteers that will understand what they can really change and where they can really contribute, and that it really works. So it's not something that you imagined. And it's also important to try to use different communication channels, so social media, offline communicational channels, posters, going to schools, going to libraries, and so on, because sometimes for example, even in Ukraine, I'm from small town myself, and I didn't know about volunteering since like 16 years old, because I didn't have any information about it. So there were some volunteer opportunities, but nobody knew about them because they were shared on specific communicational channels and like specific people only saw them. So it's also important to use as much communicational channels as possible to share the information, so different people can share with others. And then, for example, one person will come and they will like it and they will share with others, you know. So it's also this people communication also is a good communication channel. So it's also about experience. Okay. No more questions for now. So let's go to our next stage. So when we finish our volunteer project or volunteer event, the last stage is about community. So it's our community is actually our power of our organization. So this is really our like human resources and human community and our resources for different roles in our organization. So in this stage, we think of making sure that volunteers come back to us, that they return to our organization, maybe not in volunteer role, maybe not in volunteer position, maybe in some other role, but they stay with us, stay with our organization, they strengthen our community, they become part of our community, and so on. So in this case, we think about what can we offer to volunteers who are leaving us. So maybe they are leaving because they started a new job, or they have some new schedule, and so on. So, but in this case, we need to understand and create opportunities that they can join in this case. So maybe they will not be volunteers, but they will be donors of our organization and create monthly donations to our work. Or maybe they will come back to us as employees of our organization. Yeah, so this is also an opportunity for them and for you to have an effective and professional employee as well. And also in this case, in this stage, we think about how do we stay in touch with those who volunteered with us. So do we provide regular newsletters for them? And do we say thank you? Do we send any greeting cards for them during Christmas holidays or other holidays that are important to us? Do we provide them information with other volunteer opportunities, and so on? So this is important because, again, even if those volunteers came to you only once, it's important for you to keep in touch with them because they can return and they can join you in other roles or in other volunteer projects or in other volunteer events. So for example, I'm actually, I think, a good example of this case because I started my way in Ukrainian volunteer service as a volunteer 3 years ago. And I was just volunteering for some period of time. And then I became an employee and still working here for 3 years and developing the organization and developing myself as well. So again, volunteers and community and volunteer community that you create is really strengthening your organization because it helps you to it helps you to find people, it helps you to connect different people, to find this network, to find connections, to have different sharing of information and newsletters. And maybe if you have any cases in which you need help, you can just share the information, maybe in crisis or in any other situations, and the volunteer community will help you because you are in touch with them and you kept that communication. So again, coming to our cycle of volunteer management, when we start our volunteer program, it's important to go through all the stages in order to make our volunteer management effective. So our program will be planned and will have specific results and goals that we want to achieve. That this volunteer program will have specific ways of recruiting volunteers, to understand who are our volunteers, who are perfect volunteers, where do we look for them, and what we can offer them that will really interest them and motivate them. We also understand how we select the volunteers, and we select the volunteers thanks and according to the criteria that are important to our organization, this volunteer project, and our organizational values. We also onboard volunteers in order for them to understand how do they do something, what do they do, where do they do it, with whom they contact, with who they coordinate on any questions. We motivate volunteers throughout this stage and throughout their project with different methods for different types of motivation. We support our volunteers and assist them and help them to develop themselves, to grow their skills, to strengthen their capacity in volunteering, protect them from burnout, again, protect them from different conflict, reflect and analyze their results. We evaluate on their impact and their contribution and their work, as well as recognize and thank our volunteers for their contribution, and we involve them in our permanent community of our organization in order to have really strong community that will help us with different cases as in volunteering as in other roles that can be. And before we end, let's have Q&A session. I will be happy to answer your questions on volunteer management, on something that we talked today. And discuss it. So you can just unmute or write in chat, or there is in Q&A button as well. Any questions?
Natalia, can you talk a little bit about which is the best data keeping for the volunteers that serve it for us?
Yeah, it's really important to keep the data of our volunteers. Usually we do it on spreadsheet. So it's like a database of our volunteers that you can sort by age, that you can sort by gender, maybe by their skills or by their location or geography. So it depends on the need of your organization, of course. But it's important for organization to have this volunteer database in order to understand with who to communicate and which volunteer resources do we have. I usually encourage people to do this in Google spreadsheets, so people, volunteer coordinators or project managers can have access to it. I also encourage to have some emergency contacts of volunteers in case any emergency happens, so you can call their parents or their partners or their children or somebody in case of any emergency, as well as to keep the necessary documents of volunteers that you need for your organization. So is it volunteer contract? Is it NDA? Is it maybe their recommendation letters or so on? So it's important to have a folder with all volunteer documents in order to really have all this information to coordinate the volunteers.
Thank you, Natalia. And when onboarding the volunteers also, should they sign contracts or code of conduct? Are they accountable like the same of the permanent staff?
So after in the end of onboarding stage, it's important to sign the volunteer contract If you need, for example, this volunteer position has during this volunteer activity in this volunteer position, volunteer has access to any specific information, for example, financial information or personal information, it's important to sign the NDA, so non-disclosure agreement with volunteers. It can be in the volunteer contract or it can be another document as well. If in your organization you need to sign a code of conduct, it's also okay. Maybe it's some again SARA documents also. So any documents that is important to you as an organization in order to keep your organization safe and your volunteers safe. So this is important.
Thanks.
I think I saw some hand, but maybe. All right. Thank you so much for today. There is a slide with contacts of Ukrainian Volunteer Service where you can find any information, additional information about volunteer management, about different volunteer opportunities, and so on. And also contacts of DMAC, where you can follow the initiative on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube channel, website, LinkedIn, and also follow and contact in case of any questions or further opportunities. And with that, I'm passing the word to Evan for, okay, I see the hand. Please ask your question.
I'm sorry, it's not a question, more of a comment. Charity Digital, again, another organization, they provide a lot of volunteer support, information. So I would normally tap into those platforms as well, including of everything you've mentioned as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Perfect. Thank you for the comment. So I'll pass on to Evan for closing our workshop today.
Thank you so much, Natalia. It's been really interesting to listen to your presentation and how you break down the cycle of volunteer management into some very tangible steps and tools. I think it's very useful when we work on recruiting, organizing, motivating volunteers that dedicate their precious time to very important missions. So thank you very much for that. Also, a big thanks to everyone who has joined the call today. We hope you leave the session with some useful ideas and inspirations on either how to get started with volunteer management or continuing and enhancing your existing activities. We do have a quick poll with some evaluation questions. So if you don't mind, we would like to spend the last 2-3 minutes to just answer the questions. I think it's about 8 questions and they shouldn't take long to respond. So we would really appreciate your feedback before you leave the call and continue the rest of your day. I'm just going to leave it here for a couple of minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Especially a big thanks to you, Natalia. We appreciate you spending a couple of your hours on the International Day of Volunteering with us to share your experience and expertise on the topic. Thank you very much. And to the rest of you, as Natalia said, if you're curious to learn more, you're very welcome to reach out to Natalia's contact information there in the slides that we will share. And also, if you want to learn more about DEMAC or want to stay updated on upcoming events, you can follow us on the channels that were just shown on the screen. You can also subscribe to our newsletter or send an email. So thank you very much and have a very good the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.